So, welcome to a grand experiment, because this is not exactly going to be the troll that got on the mountain, because I had an idea. May or may not be a good one, we're about to find out. So, the reason for this is, the troll that got on the mountain was, the idea was, I really love Beowulf, you know, the epic story of the warrior's journey and so on. So I thought, well, it would be an interesting challenge to try and build a talk around that. And I did that, and I gave it at Pearl Oasis in January this year, and that seemed to work quite well. And then I gave it again at Yaps in North America. And the general response I got from giving it at Yaps in North America was, that was really good fun, but we have absolutely no idea what the point was. So instead of trying this again, because, you know, it wasn't exactly an English-speaking audience because they were Americans. But trying to give a talk that they didn't understand to a general European audience struck me as I'm going to confuse people even more. And while that might be vaguely entertaining, I think you came to Yaps to be educated as well as confused. So what I want to talk about instead is sort of, with revised and moves, the idea of everything being meta has taken the whole world by storm. So this is sort of a meta talk that's going to explain why I'm not giving the actual talk. So the idea of the troll that got on the mountain was to try and explain where we were up to with the design work for the next generation of PBIX class. But evidently it didn't really succeed at that, and I only sort of had slides 2/3 of the way through, because I wrote it when I was only 2/3 of the way through the design process. So instead of the epic tale of Scott the Troll, we are going to have the epic tale of one long-haired idiot who got tricked into writing an ORM. No, seriously. When I first turned up on Hash Catalyst on IRC in, 2005, I had the grand pleasure of throwing out a bunch of in-house code that I'd written in the very early days of Shadowcat. Because there wasn't, okay, these days, Shadowcat's entire business is helping other teams deliver inline and Perl applications. But when we very first started, we were basically doing custom e-commerce builds for people. Because, well, there was money in it, and it was something to do while we tried to build something more interesting. And in fact, the original software plan that Shadowcat was founded to achieve might exist in the next couple of years. So, only 5 years later than I expected. But that's a whole different story. That's not the point here. But I remember I came onto Hash Catalyst and I was sort of like, yes! I can throw away my in-house web framework. It's awful. I'm very glad to get rid of this. There was always a traditional thing of, there were 3 cardinal sins of a Perl program. First one is writing a web framework. Threw that away, use Catalyst. The second one is writing a templating system. Threw that away, use Template Toolkit. But my own in-house system had used Class DBI. So I was able to proudly say, at least I haven't written an ORM. Well, that worked out well. So I was on Hash Catalyst for a few months, and then they said, hey, Marcus doesn't really have time to maintain the source repository anymore. So we need somebody to volunteer to be the repository manager. I went, well, yeah, I'll give it a go. Yes, I actually volunteered for something. That was my first mistake. We seem to have continued making that mistake as a company. Because you'll find the vast majority of the infrastructure for Catalyst DBIX class moves is now on our systems. Although largely administrated now by our sysadmin. Because I hired a guy with 15 years of Unix experience, and he took one look at the servers and banned me from touching them while he sorted it out. But this is what you want when you're a developer hiring a sysadmin, right? So yeah, only person in Shadowcat that I'm afraid of. Sadly, he didn't make it this year. Maybe at some point you will get a chance to listen to him rant about the old system that I set up. But again, not exactly the point. So I've been stood around on Ash Catalyst. I used to idle there when I was getting annoyed with work, help people out with things. And I realised I was spending sort of an hour and a half a day helping people with Class DBI problems. And that was starting to annoy me. I mean, I was pretty good at finding ways of getting around it, but it was annoying me. And then Christian Hansen produced a thing called Class DBI Suite that added paging and caching support to CDBI. And people were talking about this upstart pile of crap from some recovering PHP developer called Trout. And they said they mentioned active records come on include, and the fact that it could load one and one many relationships in a single query. And somebody said, hey, you couldn't do that with Class DBI. And I sort of looked at it and went, you sure? And they're like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, fine. I've got some space on the deadline. So I pretty much disappeared from the face of the earth for 2 days. And I came back with the original implementation of prefetch built into Class DBI. And so then we carried on working on that for a while. And then I reached a point where I was spending more time fighting design problems in the Class DBI internals than I was adding features. So I went and I had a chat with Tony Bowden, who was maintaining Class DBI, and I believe still is. And he was very happy that all of the overexcitable people who want new features are now using DBI's class, so he doesn't have to tell them no. And he and I chatted about it and basically went, well, there's no way to refactor this without breaking compatibility, because half the user base are relying on bugs. So there isn't any way we can fix this. So I thought, well, I know what I'll do. I'll start a research project and investigate some ideas for the future of ORMs. And that research project was called DBI's class. And we got as far as releasing 0.03. And people went, hey, this is working really well for us. I'm like, what? This is a research project. What are you using? They went, oh, we just copy SVN trunk occasionally and put that into production. What? So they were quite happy doing that. I wasn't happy with them doing that. So that was the point at which we developed a stable release cycle. I got to make one last big change before we did that, which was to throw next.pm sideways out of core and replace it with class C3, which is written by Stephen Little, the man who created Moose. And that was really nice. And we went, hey, we should do that with Catalyst. 4 years later, we did. Catalyst, unfortunately, was already aiming for production stability. And Big I's class wasn't at that point, so I just managed to squeak it in. And so we carried on developing it. We went total compatibility, stable release cycles, all great. And that worked out really well. And we ended up with a wonderful documentation team who could translate MSD into English. This is why you can actually understand DBI's class without reading the test suite now. And lots of other fantastic people joined in and helped out with stuff. And then we sort of went, well, this is actually going pretty well, but we're still calling ourselves 0.05. Well, let's kind of see. Why don't we work out what features we think are missing, and we'll do something that we're happy to call 1.0. So for about the third time in my life, and it didn't work the previous 2 times, so I don't know why I did it. In 2007, I think it was, I made a New Year's resolution that we would get DBI's class to 1.0 by the end of the year. Yeah, apparently promising software by Christmas works just as badly for everybody. And of course that didn't happen, and then we got 0.7 out and 0.8, and the idea then was, well, we'll do 0.9, and then we'll have no new features till 1.0. And you may have noticed we're still on 0.8 as a result. Which was, again, a really clever thing on our part. But anyway, so then, Brandon Black got annoyed because class C3 took too long to load, so he wandered off and added C3 to core for Build 5 version 10, which is an absolutely fantastic thing. And we adopted SQL Translator and SQL Abstract because the original maintainers didn't have tried to fix as much as we were hoping, and we've always preferred the idea of depending on CPAN rather than reinventing everything. Because again, you know, if you want to reinvent everything, C-round. So we were sort of going, okay, well, where do we go next? And then of course Moose turns up. People are going, when are you going to put the out class to Moose? Well, do we have to? I mean, it works. Why rewrite everything just for the point of being able to say this now uses Moose? You know, class C3 can take a while to load. Moose can take a while to load. So we'd exchange one startup overhead for another startup overhead in a slightly different app. And then that didn't seem that exciting to us. So we sort of thought, we sort of sat down and started thinking about it. And started thinking about what we got right and what we got wrong, and what needed to be changed. And the one thing that we definitely did get right was that about that point we shut up about it and stopped mentioning Christmas anymore. Certain people, please take note. Sorry. Right, I need to know how long I'm actually taking waffling, so I'll put that down. There we go, 30 minutes in, that's fine. I might actually get to a point before I run out of time. You hope. Started thinking about that, but there were a number of really silly mistakes that we made. The first one, I borrowed straight from class DDR. Search, trying to be clever in list context. Oh my god, that was a mistake. Template toolkit calls everything in list context. So you can't actually get a result set in list context in template toolkit. Well, you couldn't. So we added search underscore RS. And if you look at code bases using DBIX class, everywhere throughout the code base is method name underscore RS calls. All to work around that one mistake I made 4 or 5 years ago. Wonderful. So nice to be reminded every day that you're an idiot, you know? But the thing that really annoyed me though, was things like $RS arrow next. Having the iterator attached to the result set was stupid. It's awful because it means that if you iterate it and then you have the same result set to something else, and the something else goes, oh, there's no records because they needed to call reset. I mean, you know, the thing that really annoys me is, I knew that each percent hash was a bad idea. That's a global iterator. And then I gleefully copied the same mistake without paying any attention. Oops. So, we were looking at this and I realised that to an extent, while I'd done a lot of other things wrong, I actually quite liked the tangram idea of having objects not knowing that they were persistent. And so I started thinking about how do we do that. Obin has some very nice blog posts in which he points out that the DBIX class object has inherited about 250 methods from various places. And yeah, that's kind of it. It works, but it's not right. So we started thinking about proper orthogonal persistence. And this, by the way, is where the main pun from the troll god on the mountain comes from. I will spare you the details of most of that talk, but the reason it was a troll was so that at the end, I could make the troll see through and have him raised from the dead, and have orthogonal, transparent, persistent trolls. Yeah, you see? Now you're glad I didn't give that talk, right? But anyway, the sort of point of this was, we started looking at what are the actual components here? How do we separate this out into layers? And realised, okay, SQL abstract isn't bad for what it does, but it's very hard to introspect because it mixes sugary glib syntax with explicit syntax, and as a single recursive piece of code processes the whole thing. So we needed to fix that. SQL translator, there is a Moose port of it that all